I am Kiran Makkar, and today I am going to uh, describe the language of processes. These processes can be seen in the task 1 of the academic IELTS test, and the student has to describe the process. Many other types of graphs can come, there's no choice. So, this today I am going to discuss the language of processes. The first step in learning to write about a process diagram is to see where the process starts and ends. This is very important as it will help to structure your writing. The obvious thing to do is to start at the beginning and carry on till you get to the end. But there are two types of processes, the linear process and the cyclical process. In the linear process, it's very easy to know where the process starts and ends. But in the cyclical process, a little bit of expertise is needed because the student has to identify where the process starts and where it ends. For example, in the life cycle of the butterfly, egg, larva, pupa, adult, and then again egg, larva, pupa, adult. So you have to realize that you have to start from somewhere where it would sound very practical, and in these cases, we can start from the egg. And then for the processes, we need to learn the language of sequencing to put things in a sequence. Sequence means in an order. So sequence means to put in an order, and this means that you need to find language to say in what order each thing happens. The key here is variation. You have to use different vocabulary. Try not to say and then all the time. So, for example, you are describing the process of making of chocolate. You say, and then this is done, and then this is done, and then this is done. So that will sound very monotonous, repetitive. It would not fetch you a high band score. So you have to learn some vocabulary. Here are some alternatives that you can use. You can say, the first step involves, in the second step, this happens, in the next step this happens, or the next step is to do something, a further step involves this, eventually this happens, or you can say this step involves, and or you can say after this stage is complete. If something is happening at the same time, then you can say at the same time or meanwhile this is happening. And for the last step you can use the word finally. So the first step involves this, the second step involves this, or in the first step this happens, in the second step this happens, and eventually this happens, and after this stage is complete, then this happens. So, like that, you can use this language of sequencing. And second vocabulary to be learned for the process graph is the language of the passive voice, is the passive voice. So, in this passive voice, um, we where where do we use the passive voice? Basically, we use the passive voice where the work being done is more important than the person doing the work. There we use the passive voice, not the active voice. Uh, Another thing that you have to see is that uh, in the natural processes, we do not use the passive voice. We use the passive voice only in the man-made processes. And first, let me teach you the use of the passive voice. So, in the English syntax, in the English sentence syntax, it is like subject, verb, and object. Most of the sentences use this structure. For example, let us make a very small sentence to explain it to you. Rita makes tea. Rita here is the subject. Makes is the verb and tea is the object. Now, in the Punjabi language, I teach here in Punjab, so I am adding this here. in our language, Punjabi, which is our language one, the sentence structure is subject, object, verb. In that we say Rita cha banandi hai. We don't say Rita banandi hai cha. So there the sentence structure is subject, object, verb. Maybe this will help you when you are formatting some sentence in your mind in Punjabi and then translating it to English. So might be this helps you. That is why I just mentioned it here. Now when we use the passive voice, we bring the object to the front and take the subject to the back of the sentence. And then in place of the simple verb here, we use a form of be plus the third form or the participle form of the verb. So here we bring t to the front, t, and then we write a form of be is made by Rita. So tea is made by Rita. We don't say tea makes Rita. That would be very wrong. Rita makes tea. Rita is somebody who does something. Rita is the subject. Tea is the object. Tea is being made. So tea is made by Rita. So throughout most of your description for your IELTS process diagram, you should be using the passive voice. But in the man-made process only you use the passive voice. In the natural process, you do not use the passive voice. Natural process, for example, in the water cycle, water evaporates. So you can't write sea water is evaporated by the sun. No. Sea water evaporates by the heat of the sun, then it forms clouds, and then when the clouds get heavier, the water falls down as rain, and the process goes on and on. So this was about the water cycle. Here we do not use the passive voice because it is a natural process. Now in all the man-made processes we use the passive voice. Now let us do some example practice for this. Now the flowchart below shows the recycling procedure of glass bottles. This process was seen in 2014 in Australia and China. Now we have the recycling procedure of glass bottles. You have to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Now uh, this is the process. So in the first step, this is glass bottles collected from public. Now you can say in the first step, glass bottles, here you have to put the form of be. Glass bottles are collected because glass bottles is plural, so we can't use is. So we say glass bottles are collected from the public, from the people. And here they have given the glass bottles brown, clear, and green. So you can say glass bottles are collected and they are segregated into brown, clear, and green colors. Then these in the next step, these glass bottles are transported by a lorry or a car or a bus or whatever. They are transported. So are is the form of be and transported is the third form of transport, transported, transported. So third form, participle form. So these glass bottles are transported to the processing plant. So in the processing plant, two things are taking place. First, the classification of the bottles is done into two types, those having metal cap and those having the plastic cap. They are classified separately. Then the whole glass is broken, is broken. Here are classified into two types. The whole glass is broken. So these two things take place in the processing plant. Then this broken glass is carried by a car to the furnace. This is the furnace where the glass and the other raw materials, they are heated at 1200 degrees centigrade. And this happens in the glass factory. And another thing which happens in the glass factory is that this melted mixture is put into molds and new bottles are made. So we have this process of the recycling of the glass bottles, and note the use of the passive voice. So this is all about the vocabulary of the processes. Let us take let us read the sample answer once. The given picture illustrates the stages in the recycling of glass bottles. It is clear that 7 steps are involved in the process. Another thing you must note is that the simple present tense is usually used in the processes. So in the first step, glass bottles are collected. Just see, here I have used the language of sequencing, and here I have used the form of be, and this is the third form of the verb or the participle form of the verb. They are collected from the public and segregated. So here it is segregated, and this is the verb which we have already written before. This goes for collected also and segregated also into green, brown and clear colors. In the second step, this is another language of sequencing. They are transported to the processing plant where classification is done based on the metal and plastic caps which are removed. In the fourth step, the glass is broken, and then in the fifth step, this broken glass is transported by car to a glass factory where there is a furnace in which glass and other raw materials are mixed and heated at 1200 degrees Celsius. In the seventh and final step, the melted mixture is then used to make new glass bottles in the glass factory. Overall, it can be seen that recycling of glass bottles is a long and tedious process involving many steps. So this is my graph of today. This vocabulary is of the process graphs. You must practice the process graphs, must practice the active and the passive voice, must work on the language of sequencing, and then if you get a process graph in your exams, you are very lucky because you have done all the vocabulary and you have learned by writing here, practicing a few process graphs. You have practiced your both these types of vocabulary very nicely. So uh, I wish you all the best, and I hope you like the explanation. Thank you.